Welcome to Grail Country. This is part of my continuing series of dipping my toe into another world that I'm interested in besides theology and philosophy, and that is the world of tabletop role playing games. And my guest today is Dr. Greg Gillespie, who is a game designer and also a college professor at Brock University in Canada, where he is an associate professor in communication, popular culture, and film. And his academic background is in history. Welcome, Dr. Gillespie, to the program today. And so how did you first, let's just kind of like start at the very beginning. How did you first become interested in tabletop role-playing games, like from the beginning? Like, what was your first encounter, and how did that happen for you?
Well, I had a friend in grade school, so I was in like this smart kids class, and we all knew each other kind of really well. And so a friend came to school one day and said, "Yeah, have you heard about this game? Like it's called Dungeons and Dragons, and it has, you get to play like a knight or whatever." And I heard knights and dragons, and I was in. So he said they were going to be playing on the weekend at his friend's house, and so I went over and then we walked down the street and we went into of course it was in the basement, as all good D&D origin stories begin. And there was this big kind of like fruit bowl in the center of this table filled with polyhedral dice. I had never seen anything like that before, so I was instantly captivated. And then of course, looking at the art of the books and the modules was right up my alley as a young boy with a creative imagination. And from there, we had a small hobby shop in the town I grew up. So I was marching down there to buy books, and just like people of our generation, if you heard or saw, I'm not quite sure what I covered before then, but
That's okay. So we had a little bit of some technical difficulties there, but Greg was just telling me about how he got started with tabletop role playing games. He'd been in a class for smart young folks, and one of his friends asked him if he'd heard about this game with knights and dragons, and he was initiated in somebody's basement and was attracted to the allure of the polyhedral dice. And then you were talking about going to your hobby shop.
Yeah, so it was kind of funny. Like if you watched, remember the TV show Freaks and Geeks, and in the show there would be like a buzz. Oh, there's a new D&D book coming out, and I was of that same generation as yourself, and reflected in Freaks and Geeks. Well, then you just march straight down to the closest hobby shop, and for me, it was actually. The town I was in was pretty small, and you had to hop on your bike and ride a fair distance, and then you had to ride back. And so that was a pretty exciting time. It would be the buzz at school about the new book and what's in it and what was cool about it. And then we tried to make sense of it all and play together.
So, like, first of all, how old were you?
Right around 9 or 10.
Okay, 9 or 10. So this had been okay. So we started playing at pretty close to the same age. I think I started playing when I was 11. So that had been like in 1982. So I think we were pretty. If you were a little younger than we might have actually started playing the same year.
Yeah, I think
or it was pretty close.
Right around then, because I had this habit in my books because we'd all have the same books, right? And on the inside, I'd put my name and my phone number and my home room number in my elementary school. So that's how I could go back and remember what year it was.
Yeah, that's great. That is really cool. Did you how old were you playing with kids your own age when you first started?
Yeah, I was. So we were all in the same class. We knew each other really well. And so what would happen was when the weather was good, we'd go outside and play. And then when weather started to get cold in turn, we'd harass the librarian to go into one of the reading rooms where we would play D&D. And he didn't like that very much because he wanted to be able to go for lunch or recess or whatever in the staff lounge. And we had to swear on our future children's graves, that we'd be good and we wouldn't burn down the library while he was gone. And
Right.
so that worked out really well. And I still have those friendships to this day.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm in touch with a couple people that I played with back in those days, but not too many. But that's really neat that you still have those connections.
Oh, yeah.
So how long was it before you started to run a game yourself? When did you step your toe into being a DM?
Well, we did almost initially with
Okay.
trying to put together dungeons, and they were really rudimentary, because there was no real context. You'd have like Tiamat in one room, and then you'd have like four giants in the next room right beside Tiamat. It was just ridiculous, right? And they were kind of like Monty Hall deals,
Mm-hmm.
and but that we didn't know any better, and we were just having fun and rolling dice.
And you're
And
9.
yeah, and we're just green as the grass. I mean,
Yeah.
so and again, we had, like everybody did, sometimes you had to sit there with a dictionary to try to decipher High Gygaxian to make sense of the Dungeon Master's Guide or whatever it was at the time. So we did our best with that, and it was a lot harder, of course, back in the day. You couldn't just pick up your phone and Google something. You actually had to crack books and whatnot. And I was in a French immersion class, so we were already accustomed to doing homework in English and then translating it in French. And you'd sit there with a French-English dictionary, go flipping back and forth, learning new words. And it was kind of seamless, my experience of early Dungeons and Dragons with my academic experience.
Gotcha. Right, because there definitely was a lot of reading and research involved.
There
No
really
doubt about it.
was, yeah.
Yeah, it's like
And then learning all the pole arms. Like he had this all that, he had a fetish for pole arms, and so of course that's a fun thing to reference here and now and again in books and things.
my day job is a quad. I work in a quasi. I'm not a lawyer, but I work in a quasi legal field. I work in public disclosure, and I always joke that my preparation for work in public disclosure was rules lawyering.
Oh yeah. Well, I joke with my students that so if you think of like an undergraduate calendar, right? Every time you flip to a course you want to take, and it's got its prerequisites, and so and then you're talking about what race can you be, what class can you be, and prerequisites. And so I often relay it to them in those terms. Okay, you've got the courses that you are required. You have to have those. You've got your electives, but those electives conflict with your requireds, but you really want to take them. And you also have to have prerequisites. And so the back and forth of thinking, like if you're not thinking like a person who's played D&D a lot, but think of somebody that's coming new to it, that's actually a pretty good analogy, because that's where you're going back and forth with courses trying to fit just like you would creating a player character.
Right. So so you started running games right off the bat. And when did you first publish like an actual like role-playing game product as a designer? How long was that from like when you entered into the hobby?
That's quite late
Right.
relative to the overall scheme. So here, just if people don't know, so like as a professor, you don't usually study things in a one-off fashion. You don't do things willy-nilly. There's a program, and that program usually lasts about 7 years. So what you're trying to do is you're trying to do the field research or whatever research you're trying to do. You're trying to publish a couple peer-reviewed journal articles, and then you want that to climax in your sabbatical year. So sabbatical is when you don't have to teach that year, but you are responsible for publication. So what you want, everything climaxing to that year in which you don't have to teach and you can focus on the writing. So about every 7 years for somebody in the social sciences and humanities, if they have a long-term view of what they're doing, and most do, then you have a 7-year program. And at the end of that 7-year program, you're so sick and tired of reading and studying that subject, you're desperate to do something else. So after I had published or revised my dissertation into book manuscript form and published it with UBC Press, I was like, okay, I never want to touch that subject again. And I want to do something I really want to do, which is study nostalgia and tabletop role-playing games. So I did that for a couple of years as I was playing my home game, which became Barrow Maze. Mm-hmm. And so my first publication effort was Barrow Maze 1, which is the first sort of half of it. And that's sort of how it came about.
And that was like roughly when, like 2011, something
11,
like that?
Yeah, about 2011, yeah.
Yeah, okay. So, yeah, so I was kind of aware of that. So it's interesting. It's like, had it been in the back of your mind as something that you wanted to try? Like, were you gaming off and on in that interval between the time you first discovered the game and the time that you finally decided, I think I'm going to undertake this ambitious design project? Like, what was your relationship with gaming between the time that you were first introduced to the game and you actually deciding to, like, okay, I want to contribute something to this hobby that as a designer?
Sure. Played a ton of first edition in the 80s, a ton of second edition in the 90s. Tried my hand at third edition, didn't like it. Did some of the early playtesting for fourth edition, hated it. Same thing with fifth edition. So, I've poked my nose into these games, but they just don't, they've continued to go opposite the direction that I think tabletop role-playing should go. So there's that happening in the background. And they're not my first love, and never have been, the WotC editions, that is. So it's just came to a point where I worked with a graduate student on a nostalgia tabletop role-playing game study looking at the advanced adventures that were done by Expeditious Retreat Press. And I had done an article on the Goodman Games DCC series from the early 2000s. And then a friend of mine suggested, because we were playing, and he said, why don't you just, write your own nostalgia role-playing game? And that's what I was like, that is a good idea. Why don't I do that? Now, at most universities here, I don't know about the United States, but here you can advance either through peer-reviewed academic publishing or creative publishing. So what's the difference? So academic peer-reviewed is pretty standard across every discipline at any university. But creative publishing happens a little bit less. And an example of that would be, say, a history professor wants to do a civic history display. That would count as creative work. If a film professor wants to write a screenplay, that would be creative work and not peer-reviewed. If a professor wants to write a game, that would be creative rather than peer-reviewed. So there's two different avenues one can explore that would count as part of your overall endeavor and labor.
Right, gotcha. So it was that. So someone suggested it, and it wasn't actually like harmful to your career goals either. It could be complementary to them.
Well, so I wouldn't. Yes, from what I said, I would say yes. However, there are still a lot of stodgy academic types who are, strictly peer review is the only way to do things, blah, blah, blah. And I'm not one of those people. So I published in top end peer reviewed journals. And then once you do that after a while and you come to a realization of how the politics of knowledge actually work, how censorship works in academic thought and academic publishing, it becomes very disenchanting. And then you layer on top of that leftist politics of publishing. So, for example, I refuse to fill out a DIE statement with regard to my research. I don't think it's necessary. And I think it's the overlapping of a particular political agenda on top of the politics of knowledge, or as part of the politics of knowledge. And I won't do it. I won't do it on principle. So that's why one of several reasons why I decided to go a different route as well. So everything, I guess, to put a bow on it, was aligning in a particular direction, and I just came to this conclusion. And it's like, this is not the reason why I got into academics, because I'm all about freedom of thought, freedom of inquiry, freedom of language, freedom of speech. And we've had sort of the clamps put down on those things in higher education in this country, as well in the United States too. And it's so that's those are other reasons, alongside my desire to give back to the hobby and to explore those creative options.
And of course, then you get into role-playing game design, which is no politics in it at all.
No, well, comparatively, no. Now, so here's the other thing. When I went through my graduate study in the late 1990s and early 2000s, it was not like it is today. Like, what I went through was scathing. Like, we're talking, one of my mentors said, he wants the blood on the floor version when you bring a paper forward to a class for analysis and for constructive criticism. It was harsh, very, very harsh, intellectually. Like, go home and rethink your life, harsh.
Right.
So there's nothing that anybody could say in the role-playing game world that would ever come close to the baptism of fire I received as a young man in graduate school. And I look back on that. You and I are from the generation that you weren't concerned, you couldn't be too concerned about mental issues. Rather, you had to develop a thick skin. You had to prepare yourself for life, and you had to, if you received very cutting criticism, you had to be a mature adult, and you had to internalize it, and then you had to reflect on it, and then you had to be better for it. So, those are things that that kind of mental toughness, I think, has been really important to my intellectual development. And then also, having been involved in sports and athletics as a young man, getting your face shoved in the dirt and then having to stand up and do it over again and over again and over again, and also build some mental toughness as well. And those are important lessons, and I've learned them both intellectually and on the athletic side of things.
Gotcha. So you learned that lesson of being comfortable with being uncomfortable.
Yes.
Yeah.
But also, one of the things that I think is really missing from adult, mature dialogue is that it's totally okay to disagree, but you don't have to be disagreeable while you do it. Yeah. So, someone, they might want their game to look or play a certain way. That might not be to my taste. And I can say that it's not to my taste, and I can do it without being disagreeable. But, because of the, we live in an unbalanced society, politically, that filters down through popular culture, and has come to role-playing games in the last few years in particular. So that's unfortunate, but at the end of the day, I think as long as we're interested in good gaming and good ideas, and we can let those out into the market, and then ideas will either float or they'll sink, and that's exactly the way it should be.
Yeah, I had this like moment of l'esprit d'escalier after my conversation with Alexander McCreast that I had recently, and he was describing his personal experience with the cancel mob, and the way he described it to me was rather poignant, because he compared it to like the experience of being bullied in high school, where there's just no defense for it, and the behavior is just fundamentally immature. And so I think you really hit the nail on. I mean, what you said reiterates that. It's like immaturity is so much of a problem with our political discourse. Mm-hmm. And here's the part that I didn't think about in the middle of the conversation with McCreast that I did think about afterwards. It seems like to me that the dissolution of the family and the lack of positive masculine role models and lack of fathers in the home is that perhaps downstream from the degradation of our political discourse.
Oh, I think so.
Maybe it might be partially explanatory as to why people, behave so immaturely. So
Yeah. Well, I think, one of the things, I'm not sure, is my light
yeah, you got a
flashing?
light that's strobing. Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, okay. Well, let me see if I can adjust that
Oh, yeah, you're
on the
good.
quick mark.
Yeah, it's already good. Whatever
Okay,
you
good.
did, it fixed it.
So number one, I'm a big Alex McCree's fan. So
Yeah.
buy Axe, support him. He does good work, and I'm a big fan. And then the other part of it is that as an educator, if you send me a boy, you send me your boy. I'm not just going to develop him intellectually. I'm going to develop him as a young man, and that's part of my responsibility as an educator. And so I know a lot of people that just think there's intellectual development, period. But I don't think that way. Hopefully, I'm modeling for the young people that I teach what I would like to see in them, and if I do that, I'm being successful. So I try.
Yeah, that's great. That's yeah, you take your responsibility as a role model seriously, because I mean, when people come into, kids that come into college, they really are kids. I mean, they're
They
not
are.
they're not grown-ups yet.
No, they're
And
not.
so they do need that. So that's excellent. Okay, so I want to go back a little bit to something you said at the very beginning, even before about, so for some reason, even before you discovered D&D, you already had an interest in knights and dragons. Where does that come from?
I you know I don't I think most boys have an overactive imagination. So I was read a lot of fairy tales. My parents would read to me. My mother would read to me every night before I go to bed. And I always enjoyed like Grimm's fairy tales and things like that. So I think that's definitely part of it. And then I gravitated to that stuff. So if you're asked to like read a book or pick a book from the library, it tended to be something like that, or was something about military history. So I tended to go one way or the other. And I have a family that has a military service, and so that was a big part of it. I'd sit on my dad's knee and we'd watch the World at War series. Remember that from way back in the day?
Yeah.
And so that's a big part of it too. And then of course, my parents are from the UK, and I've always had this romantic fascination with Scotland, and that's also factored into it. The myths, the lore, the history of Great Britain.
Gotcha. Okay, that's great. So your first project that was Barrel Maze, and what was it that why did you decide, of all the things to take on as a first project, why a mega dungeon, which I think like really had fallen out of favor like quite some time before. It seems to me that like your publication of Barrel Maze seems to have gone a long way toward revitalizing interest in the forum.
Well, I if that's great, I appreciate it, and I certainly be gratified if that was the case. I think, well, I have this bad habit of thinking pie in the sky. So when I think about a project, whether it was something academic peer reviewed or whether it's a creative project, I try to think, what's the coolest, most awesome thing I could possibly do? And so you throw the bar way up there.
Right.
And then you say, okay, well, in a perfect world, this is what I could do, but logistically, here's what I have to work with. Financially, here's what I have to work with. And then sometimes you have to sacrifice the vision for the logistics. So having said that, I still like to shoot for the stars, and I have a dark creative imagination. And so those are some of the reasons why Barrel Maze initially came about. And then practically, it was just a good idea. My children were very young at the time, and I'd have time to prepare when they go to sleep, or if they were napping or whatever, but I didn't necessarily have time immediately before a play session to prepare. So I'd prepare when I could, and that could have been a week before, 2 weeks before, or whatever. And it just made playing regularly easier to do.
Gotcha. Gotcha.
It was definitely a tentpole, which, you hear that phrase used in role-playing games. It was a tentpole for my campaign at the time.
Sure. So, most of your previous projects have been this kind of mega dungeon form. Which of the mega dungeons that you've written to date is like, which is the closest to your heart? Which do you feel the strongest attachment to?
Drody, probably, because I have this big affinity for dwarves. I think dwarves in Dungeons and Dragons are like Klingons in Star Trek, and I mean that from the
I love you so much right now for saying these things, by the way.
So I don't want anybody to run away saying, Greg says dwarves are like Klingons. That's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is, the more Klingons in Star Trek, the more interesting Star Trek becomes. Star Trek Discovery excluded.
Right.
So, but dwarves are they were super cool in Tolkien's work. They're no nonsense. I think everybody appreciates people that are no nonsense. They're gritty. They're all in, and I think that resonates with Klingons in Star Trek. I think it resonates with dwarves in D&D. So, Drody is kind of like my love letter to both Tolkien. But it has to be it has to be Dungeons and Dragons too, right? So, right. And I'm shocked. I'm just shocked that that somebody hadn't done it before. Because if you think of Moria is every dungeon.
Yes.
Really.
Right.
It really is. So in that context, it's so darn cool in the books and the films. And
I still have the actual Moria product that they put out in in the mid 80s.
Yeah.
But so other than that, really, it hadn't been, not to this extent.
Right.
Nothing of this scale.
Right. But that product in the 80s was not playable.
Right.
So it hadn't been D&D-ified. So it wasn't a marriage between Tolkien and D&D. Right. And so that's really what I set out to do. And dwarves are just really because I'm a very tall person. When I role play, I like to play dwarves because I want to know, what life is like at 4 feet tall as opposed to 6'5". And I think, and I like the personality of dwarves. So that all factors right in. So that's the one that's probably closest to my heart. And that's another pie in the sky item. So all those zipitomes, those images that run along the bottom of the pages in Dwerdy, that's what I really, really wanted to do. And then it's this is going to be really expensive. So there's that part of it. And then I need an artist on board because I'm going to basically occupy an artist for a year to come up with these things. And we made it happen. So, and I'm very pleased and very gratified. And each of those little things tells the story of the page. So that was a lot of fun to do. And it's a creative expression as well. And then, but I'm of course most well known for Barrow Maze. And that's okay too. I had a lot of fun playing that with my friends. It's probably the best when I think of the 80s and the 90s, I think those Barrow Maze years were some of the best gaming I ever had.
Yeah. Barrow Maze is also good, but Dwero Deep just hits all the right notes for me. And I do realize in terms from a popularity standpoint, I noticed that talking to people at NTRPG Con, it's Dwero Deep doesn't seem to be as popular, but to me, it's just I think you hit it out of the park.
Well, thanks.
So we'll see. We'll see 10 years from now how people feel.
See, I think you've nailed it right on the head with that statement because there's a lot of forethought in Dwero Deep. Yeah. There's so much forethought in there. A casual reading is not going to pull it all out. Correct. But on a longer term, I think, and I said this to people as I was making it, I said, Dwero Deep's going to be the gem. And mark my words.
Yeah.
And we'll see in 10 years where we're at.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, just revisit it in 10 years and then we'll see how people feel about it. Okay.
I think you're right.
So you've made these wonderful, complex, interesting mega dungeons, and you're starting to get, some wind in your sails as a designer. While you're still doing your work as an associate professor. And you decide now you've launched this Kickstarter, and now you're taking on the holy grail of game design. You're designing your own game. And it's called Dragonslayer. And tell me about that game, and why you think it was the right time to make it, and why you think where you see it fitting within the marketplace.
Sure. So this is work I started on 2.5 years ago. And what had happened, the rule set I had published to previously had just languished, and it wasn't going anywhere. And so it just became clear to me that what I needed to do in the future was to provide a solid foundation under myself, so that if I was publishing to a rule set and either that person flaked out or it became, there was some sort of issue, that I didn't have to worry about my publication efforts moving forward. And that's what this is. That was part of the impetus. And so what I want everybody to understand is that, from Barrel Maze, preceding Barrel Maze, I've had a way of playing at my table. That way has always been reflexive and reflective. So as I would try new games, as I would try new editions and things of that nature, it would be, okay, that's no good, I'm not interested. But there are always little gems that you can learn, right, from a new game or whatever. And so, I'm a very stout OSR person, and that's the game that I enjoy. But we've also done a lot at my table, experimenting with some of the issues that people have always kind of complained about. Fighters have always been sort of like bland vanilla. They needed a little spruce up, and so I've done that. Druids needed a little bit of help. They get hosed in favor of clerics. Illusionists get hosed in favor of magic users. So all those things sort of needed to be addressed, and we addressed them at my table. And then one of the other main things is that all my books have always been written with movement rates to include miniatures, because I love to paint miniatures and use terrain and that sort of thing. Not that I do it all the time. I don't do it all the time. Everyone gets busy. You don't have time for it or whatever. But it's something that's very important. And I know, so the game can be played theater of the mind, or it can be played with miniatures, and it's absolutely seamless. And so this game that inspired Barrel Maze and Archaea and Highfell and Dwerodeep, it's just that game being codified. And that's exactly my intent. The power curve is lower than any other edition of D&D in terms of its base form. So if you compared, Thaco in AD&D to my game will have a lower power curve. Having said that, there are still opportunities to get bonuses and things of that nature tactically, but you have to work for them. So a lot of these things, so if you're a savvy D&D player who especially with TSR editions, right, you're accustomed to the formalized rules, but you're also accustomed to the informal rules. So all Sun Tzu's Art of War kind of stuff that we all apply in our tabletop games. So that stuff is codified into it, so that all the bonuses are there if you're taking advantage of high ground, if you're flanking an opponent, if you're doing these kinds of things. And it encourages, I think, the game that I've created encourages more actually playing to your role and less generic role playing. The more you play to your role, the more successful the party will be. And that's codified into it. So that's all part of it. And And then, of course, one of the other reasons why I wanted to do it is that I'm not.
Do you think that kind of like impulse to design that way is influenced at all by your team sports background, the kind of do your job mentality?
Well, I do. I hadn't really considered it in those terms, but yeah, like I really get annoyed. Like we've all played with like that D&D player that thinks it's all like it's Munchkin, like you're just supposed to screw over your fellow party members. I hate those people. Like, or let me rephrase it. I hate that style of play.
Yes.
And I discourage it at my table. Yes. Play together. I mean, that's what it's really all about. You're stronger together, better together. And then so I try to emphasize those things. And at the end of the day, I think that it's a super fun game to play. It offers options that aren't available in other games, and it's going to be the best looking OSR book available ever. There's no question in my mind. And I think, from the feedback people have given me from the art that we've shown so far, I have no question this is going to look like an awesome coffee table book, and it's going to be a great book to have on your table to play.
Okay, so your title, I have to ask, since we're of the same generation, was the title more inspired by the 1981 film or the later mid-80s video game?
Mm-hmm. Well, so I went through a few different names. So okay. This is November, December of last year, and I consulted a few people I knew, and then I started thinking about it. I definitely wanted something that was 80s inspired, because the game is 1978 to 1983. Very much in the forefront. And then I went to have the name trademarked, and it wasn't trademarked in any category. I was shocked, and I'm like, okay, we can do this, so let's do it. So I did my due diligence, and I'm very pleased. And then the font is brand new, so it's created for this game. You're not going to find it anywhere else. It's called Dragonslayer with a D.
Okay. That makes sense.
Yeah, just a little bit of fun. And so I'm very excited about that. And then I worked with a really talented artist to come up with the new OSR logo. So it's got the O, the S like a dragon, and then the R. And then there'll be a compatibility license for anybody that wants to make cool adventures or supplements, whatever.
So what do you think? I've taken a look at the download for the that you've got on our RPG now,
it's just a sample,
like the free demo sample. Yeah. Mm-hmm. And I did back the game, by the way, so I'm just FYI. So I believe in your product. So I don't just talk to people at random. I talk to people whose work I actually want to promote. So and you're one of those people. So what would you say to the people who are like, oh, do we really need another OSR? Don't we have enough to choose from already? What drives you to think that that you've got something that is a real difference maker here? Oh, looks like we got to pause again. So obviously, as I mentioned, I backed the project, so I'm a believer in it, and I'm looking forward to it. What would you just say to those people who would say, don't we have enough? Don't we have enough of these retro clone kind of OSR games already? What would you say to convince somebody who was skeptical that like this one is really got something that's going to make it worth it for them to purchase it?
Well, I think one of the first things to recognize is the context. So after the whole OGL disaster in January, this is a rebirth. This is a time which things have changed. The OGL may not be there, and we're on this is the new dawn. So whatever stage the OSR was in prior to early this winter, we're in a new stage now. and the landscape has changed. And when the landscape changes, everybody has to change with it if you want to stay in the publishing game anyway.
Right.
So that's a big part of it. So I think a big part of the preamble to answering your question would be the context is different. We're just in a different place now than we've been before, and the dust, it hasn't settled yet. So we've had Swords and Wizardry come out. My game will come out. I'm sure there will be others, and then once these rule sets come out and people get familiar with them, then you're going to see another flowering as people say, "Oh, I'd like to publish for Swords and Wizardry," or "I'd like to publish for Dragonslayer," or whatever it may be. So that's, I think, really important that we understand what's happened in 2023 to this point, and what's yet to happen. Will they pull the OGL or won't they? So those are important considerations. And as I said, this is going to be the best looking OSR rulebook that's ever been created, because I'm sparing no expense to make this awesome. And I'm just like with Barrow Maze, everything is very highly detailed. The art works in concert with the text and the rules. Just like the art in Dwero Deep is very, very carefully thought out prior to moving forward, because you can't publish things with generic art if you want to have a unique game experience. The art needs to reflect what's it all about, So everything in Barrow Maze, for example, very dark. We're using torchlight to not only show the things you can see, but most importantly, the things that you can't. That there are limitations to your vision. Your vision is narrowed, and things are scary, and they're dark, and they're creepy. So, and then with Dwero Deep, wanted to have the that dwarven geometric aesthetic carried forward, very clearly and repeatedly. So, and Dragonslayer is no different. So there are little homages here and there that the very well-read amongst us will recognize, just like with the other things I've created as well. So, one of the big things I think it's really important with gaming is we need to be inspired. Like when you look at the front of one of the classic Keith Parkinson covers, or one of the classic Larry Elmore covers, or whatever, it gets you excited to play, or Jeff Easley gets you excited to play, and that might get you to pick up the book. But then once you pick up the book and you flip past the cover, I want every page to be bringing it, like every single page. That's something that will have longevity. Anybody can make a rule set and put it out there, but that's not my goal. My goal is to make something that looks just as good in 2023 as it will in 2033. And then once it comes out, if people enjoy it and it finds legs, then it will take on a life of its own. And that's what I hope will happen. People will create new classes, they will create new adventures, and off we go. And I'm writing it so I've got some things that are quite different. So in the rule book, you've got your standard formal writing for procedural things like spells and whatever, but I do take little opportunities sprinkled here and there to put in some humor, because it's still a game at the end of the day. And then I have sections in the appendix that are written in a more casual tone with humor. And so if somebody like us that's bled into the same mud for decades, you're going to see it, you're going to recognize it immediately. But if the book's sitting there and your 10-year-old son or daughter picks it up, they're going to, they might see some high Gygaxian or high Gillespie in there somewhere, but then they flip to the appendix, and then it's going to be written in a casual tone. It's like, oh, okay, now I get it. So I'm taking opportunities to change my writing voice, and I'm doing that purposefully and in specific sections to appeal to and to communicate to a younger audience that maybe hasn't played the game.
Mm-hmm. It's interesting, actually, talking about communicating to a younger audience. It was real. I've been gaming pretty much continually since I started, but I went away from D&D for a long time. Actually, my game of choice for the most part has been Pendragon. I don't know if you've ever played Pendragon, but that's been, so when you said knights, that definitely got my attention. And it's actually like my son, who's 23. He's the one who's like, I really want to start playing more OSR games, because he remembered the AD&D games that I ran when he was like 10.
Oh yeah.
Like as like kind of like one-offs that were just like, they weren't even like, they were just like, like little short interludes. Like maybe I do like 3 or 4 sessions as a break between my serious games, Right. But it captured his imagination, and so he's the one who's like, hey, you should try that style again. And I did, and I kind of never gone back.
Yeah,
Go ahead.
Yeah, I completely understand. I was the same way. Like when third edition came out, I was one of the people that definitely gave it a long look. And I'm like, this is like the most rules lawyery game I have ever seen in my life.
Yeah.
And the text is so dense,
right,
and small.
Yeah.
And I'm not. I have a very clear vision of the kind of layout I want. And black text on top of a colored page that's supposed to look aged and in-game does not appeal to me. That's one of the worst decisions third edition and any D20 publisher ever made, is putting black text on colored paper. Dreadful choice. It's dreadful not only for the average person, but it's particularly dreadful for the visually impaired. Right. So I just, what a dreadful, and I still see it to this day. And I cringe at it. I'm like, why on earth would you do something like that? It's not a good aesthetic or design or visual decision.
That's really interesting that you have such a clear vision of what you want your game to look like, and what you want, and you've had that kind of aesthetic sensibility with your Mega Dungeons too.
I have. They follow the same model. So Bear Mace put forward a model, and and then I carry that model forward consistently.
If you were to try to like describe that, in like a couple of sentences, how would you describe that model that you kind of have consistently? What would be your short description of that?
So number one, have a model.
Right.
So the thing is, if people go to pick up, my next Mega Dungeon book or the one after that, they're going to know where everything's located. Right. I'm not switching the sections. So I think that consistency is important. The aesthetic consistency of each section is also important. And so then, and then those things build on each other. Right. And then what I try to do, and people that are familiar with my work know this. So if I've got somebody that's doing the illustration of the town, that's the same person that's going to be doing it for the next book and the book after that, and so on and so forth. And if I have a particular section that an artist has done in the past, then I'll, if I can, within reason, I'll definitely try to repeat that moving forward. So have a model, make decisions, not like, so this is coming as an educator. So if I'm in a lecture room with 300 people, I'm not teaching to the person in the front row. I'm teaching to the person in the back row that needs glasses and doesn't have them. And so if I can communicate to that person, then I'm communicating to everybody else. Mm-hmm. And when you go at things visually from a design perspective in your work, you need to not be thinking of the person that can see clearly and can read clearly and distinguish paragraph. You need to be thinking hyper clear. You want hyper clarity, because it's so easy to confuse things. And even sometimes when you're trying your best, you'll still bugger it. But in trying your best, you'll get better. and people will, know where to look in the organization of your material.
That's good. Well, thank you, Greg, for joining me today. I look forward to seeing Dragonslayer in print soon, and thank you for the products that you've already contributed to the gaming world. I've enjoyed many of them myself, and I hope you enjoy the rest of your evening.
Well, thank you very much for having me. Thanks to everybody that's going to tune in and have a listen. And I really appreciate the support. And I'm going to keep bringing it as long as people support the project. So I do thank you, and I do appreciate it.